Gameranx presents another episode of Before You Buy, the show where we give you some straight up gameplay and some first impressions of the latest games releasing. This time around, I'm talking about Gears of War 4, a game that has some big shoes to fill. It left behind Epic Games, now it's completely owned by Microsoft and developed by the Coalition. Of course, I personally thought 1, 2, and 3 were fantastic, with Judgment just kind of being like a meh. So there was a lot to be desired and a lot going on with Gears of War 4, and I had a lot of questions going in, and thankfully, most of them have been answered from many different perspectives. First things first, let's talk about the campaign here. The campaign takes place many years after Gears of War 3. The war with the Locusts is over, but the human population was almost decimated, so society almost had to kind of reform. So in a way, you kind of feel like you're coming into a whole new world, and I think that's for good reason, because overall, this whole new adventure feels very, very familiar from a gameplay perspective, but very different from a story perspective for a Gears of War game. What we have here is a very, very personal story, starring JD Phoenix. This is the new character you get to play as, who is, the main guy from Gears of War, Marcus Phoenix's son. And I'd say, honestly, with the story, he might actually be the biggest problem, at least for me. He's fine, he's passable, but he's kind of like, I guess, if you put Nathan Drake in Gears of War armor, and then just toned him down and made him a bit more generic, because ultimately JD Phoenix, to me, is really generic and doesn't really bring a lot to the table. His comments are fine, his quips are fine, his story arc is fine, but him personally, I just couldn't find much of a reason to really get too amped about him. But the characters that surround him are pretty great. These characters, while Dell in particular doesn't really get too much to work with, that you just find them likable, you care about them, and you want to see what's going to happen to them. Of course, also you get introduced to some fan favorites and some old characters from the previous games, and their reveals are always really, really freaking awesome. It's always good to see them show up. But overall, the campaign, at least for me, was a lot of fun, but not at all what I was expecting. The story here is very small scale and personal. You're not fighting a grand war. It's not this big epic scale conflict. It's very much more a personal story about fathers and sons and daughters and mothers and like family and stuff. I know that sounds really stupid, but once you play the game, you'll understand. And it's nestled in a campaign that you can play through in about 9 hours, at least on normal difficulty. But the campaign is really varied because the game gives you some time to breathe. There's lots of shooting sections, but there's also a lot of time to walk around, smell the roses, look around, get a little spooked, and just kind of learn about this new world and new characters that Gears of War is kind of becoming, and almost like a soft reboot. For me, that made the pacing really good, and I really appreciated some moments of like big action set pieces that are very much like Uncharted or Tomb Raider or something like that are playable in different ways, similar like a vehicle section or a Brumac section in the older Gears of War games, but these I found to be a bit more fun. Maybe the one downside to this campaign and this story is that it does play it safe a little bit from a story perspective. It does kind of feel like the setup for the next big Gears of War franchise that's going to be a little different. Like I said earlier, maybe a little bit of a soft reboot thing, so it does play it safe and it does kick the can down the road a little bit. There's a lot of variety, and overall, I'm very surprised at the campaign. I think it was really great, a lot of fun. Not ultimately what I wanted going into the game, but when I came out at the other end, I was satisfied. Also, you can play the campaign 2-player split-screen co-op, which split-screen co-op isn't a thing you see enough anymore, and I just figured I'd give it a mention. I really appreciated it. The actual playing of Gears of War feels pretty much the same. I guess they went with like an if it's not broke, don't fix it type of thing, but to me, I don't know, it kind of felt like coming home. It just felt like you jumped right back into it. The muscle memory was there. They fine-tuned the controls to basically be how they used to be. It feels a little faster. And for a lot of games, I would criticize a new game not really trying to do much in the gameplay department, but with Gears of War, I don't know, I just think the shooting is so refined and I just think it's so much fun that I can't fault it too much for that, but I think some people will have a problem with that. What they did add is the ability to pull enemies over cover and then stab them with your combat knife. The combat knife is only usable in certain situations, but it makes for some cool kill animations. There's also new weapons, a couple of them, but my favorite is the drop shot, which is like a timed underground grenade that you can control how far of a distance it goes off, and you can launch it. As much as I really like using the drop shot, I really like the gameplay scenarios it created when an enemy character had the weapon, because that made it a lot of fun to kind of like dodge their shots. And the new enemy types were pretty surprisingly fun because they're just different, most notably the robots. They're called DBs, and they have a very different artificial intelligence than anything else you've played against in Gears of War, so it was kind of fun to shoot robots and really shake things up after a while. Also, the new enemy that is basically the equivalent of the Locust is explained in a decent enough way that it doesn't feel like it's just the Locust 2.0, but basically from a gameplay perspective, that is kind of what it feels like. But thankfully, this new swarm does also have a bunch of new type of creatures that are kind of like mini boss battles that I found to be a lot of fun to square up against. They really definitely changed up the battlefield a little bit with these guys. And I'm gonna be real with you guys, visually, I think this is one of the better looking games, at least on Xbox One. Look at this thing. Well, okay, I'll go back. The footage I actually recorded is on PC, so it looks even better. The game looks great. There's a lot in motion. There's lots of water, graphics, textures, particle effects going on, but there's also lots of wind that affects the trees and in the breeze, and it looks really nice, but it also affects gameplay in certain instances when there are these wild windstorms that flare up that you can actually use to your advantage on the battlefield. And when things are breaking and the wind is blowing and debris is flying everywhere, and the game just takes it like a champ and keeps chugging along, I think that's pretty good. Like the previous Gears of War games, the whole thing is really destroyed beauty here, and I like it a lot. Speaking of graphics, let's talk about multiplayer. The first multiplayer you get is versus multiplayer, which is, of course, regular straight-up Gears of War. You have all your different modes. My personal favorite is just straight-up team deathmatch. And this time around, all multiplayer, even on Xbox One, runs at 60 frames per second, which is great for Gears of War gameplay, I gotta say. So far, at least to me, the map designs are good. The sight lines are pretty perfectly honed, and it's fun. There's a bunch of different modes, and it's basically Gears of War multiplayer that you've always wanted and always played. It's worth noting, too, on Xbox One and PC, I haven't had trouble finding a match. I haven't really experienced too much lag other than the norm, and I just need to talk to some people who have never played Gears of War multiplayer before. You need to know that this Gears of War, in terms of balancing, nothing has changed in the sense that the priority here is shotguns. Use the Nasher shotgun, because that's what everybody's doing, whether you like it or not. That's usually what Gears of War multiplayer boils down to. Some of you are gonna still hate that, some of you are still gonna love it. I personally really like it. And one of my favorite aspects of Gears of War games is Horde Mode, and it's back with this Horde Mode 3.0 version, and it's good. It's, again, probably what you wanted with little bits here and there. There is a class-based system now where you can choose a different class to play as in Horde Mode. Ultimately, it doesn't seem like it has too much of an effect on the gameplay. Personally, I wasn't really crazy about it, but the choices do matter a little bit. But once again, there's a focus on building out your encampment and building defenses and basically protecting yourself, but it's cool because when the match starts now, you have this Fabricator, which is this mobile base building unit thing that you can drag around and basically set up your point and where you want to start defending. If you get a good round of Horde Mode playing with some friends online, it is just so much fun, and the best part is that it can last for hours and hours. So that to me right there is just a lot of gameplay because, like I said, the Gears of War shooting and killing is just so fun, it just makes it feel great. One thing that I do want to point out that I'm not the biggest fan of is that the Gears of War multiplayer and Horde Mode does have a card-based system very similar to what Halo 5 had, in which you can earn these basic card packs that you open up to unlock new things and new boosters within multiplayer, and you can also go and buy them. They're fun enough, I guess, and you can earn them and open them, and it's great, but I do want to point out that there is the option to pay for them, which, you know, rubs some people the wrong way. So guys, that's Gears of War 4. I gotta say, honestly, I wasn't too excited about this game, but I am genuinely surprised how much fun I'm having with it. And if you're on Xbox One and you like shooting and killing things, I can absolutely definitely recommend this. But you know what a before you buy is. I give you some pros, some cons, and some personal opinion, and now I want to hear yours down in the comments. Are you guys playing Gears of War 4 yet? How do you feel about it? Do you like the addition of the new weapons? Do you like the new enemy types? Do you think the story was good enough to justify actually making another Gears of War game? I personally think it does, but I can see some people coming off a little bit mixed with it because it is very, very different in certain stances. But anything else Gears of War, let's talk about it down in the comments. I'll be there answering questions, and I'll also be on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as well. Come talk to me about Gears over there. Guys, you know the deal. Clicking the like button helps us out a ton and helps me do more before you buys, and subscribing if you're new is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.